You're a Democrat to your bootstraps, always have been. I'm a Remainer, but I absolutely believe the biggest threat to democracy right now would be a failure driven by a largely Remain voting parliament to actually deliver Brexit. And so far, they've steadfastly shown no desire to pass any kind of deal which would do that.
Look, this is not about Brexit now. This is about a no-deal Brexit. You see, whether you were for or against Brexit, we were not told it was going to be a no-deal Brexit, one where you cannot guarantee the supplies of food, you can't guarantee the supplies of medicine, you can't guarantee the supplies of components for the car industry that I'm meeting today, which depend on imports and exports coming in and out of Britain. Now, if you're a government, and I've been in this position, and you're getting advice from your civil servants and from all those who are experts, and they're telling you that there's a huge risk that medical consignments cannot get through. Remember, 1 million medical consignments come in every day from Europe. Remember, 30% of our food comes in from mainland Europe. Remember, our car industry depends on components because half of them are coming in from abroad. If you can't guarantee that, then it's an act of self-harm to go ahead with a no deal.
But
you
Mr.
see,
Brown,
I respect the vote,
but Mr.
MPs
Brown,
have
the argument is...
They've got a duty to take into account.
Yeah, the argument is we shouldn't actually head for a no deal. The argument is, in order to get a good deal, we have to threaten the EU with those consequences of a no-deal Brexit. And if MPs tie the hands of the Prime Minister in a negotiation and say, it's all right, don't worry, we're not going to have a no deal, we've ruled that out, the EU just sit back and go, that's fine, we'll just stick with the deal we've got.
But, Susanna, I understand what you're saying, but the consequences are all consequences hitting us. It's not Europe that's going to suffer. It's Britain that's going to suffer. It's an act of self-harm to have a no deal on the 31st of October. It's like going over a cliff edge. You're crashing out. And if you know that... I looked at 4 things: the supply of insulin, the supply of EpiPens, the supply of cancer radioisotopes, and the supply of flu vaccines. Now, we cannot guarantee, because so many of these items come in from mainland Europe, we cannot guarantee that these will be available to patients. And these are life-saving treatments that are necessary for patients.
Yeah.
OK, but
now,
Gordon,
the
let me ask you
Ministry
this.
of Health
All
Commercial
right,
Director...
Let me ask you this.
Just let me finish? The Ministry of Health Commercial Director has said there will be severe shortages. He has said on record. Now, no responsible government should go ahead with an action like this when they know this to be the case.
The problem is, I have a problem with all the apocalyptic warnings generally. I have had it since Brexit happened. We were told if the vote was taken to leave, within weeks we'd be plunged into recession. It never happened. There'd be 800,000 job losses. Actually, that never happened either. I also have a long memory. I go back to the whole debate over whether this country should enter the euro. And you were in government at the time, and I had lots of representation from many people, from Tony Blair and others, demanding that the Daily Mirror, under my leadership, support us joining the European single currency. And we didn't in the end. And I was told if we didn't, it would be apocalyptic. All the things you're saying now, I was told this would be a disaster for the country. Actually, it turned out that all the experts were wrong. The government was wrong.
Piers.
All right? But, you know, I mean, I feel like, you know, well, who should I believe?
But, Piers, that's exactly my point. For the euro, we did 23 volumes of studies. We proved it wouldn't work for us. We did the work. We did the homework. We published the evidence. We showed what happened. Now, the only government document that has come out says there are huge risks. The poor, people who are watching this programme today, they say are going to suffer most, because food prices are going to go up, the Cabinet Secretary says, by 10% at least. 30% of our food comes in from abroad. That means that particularly vegetables and fruit will not be coming in. And the government knows itself. This document that was leaked 2 weeks ago says exactly this: the most vulnerable, the low-income groups. There's a section that is headed the poor and how they'll be most hit.
But the reason
and I'm
that
going to go around
document...
the country
Right,
and
but
I'm
the
going to
reason
tell
that
people,
document...
look...
Right, but the reason that document was produced, Yellowhammer, was a worst-case scenario to say, look, in a worst-case scenario, are we prepared? And it seems to me that Boris Johnson, unlike Theresa May, Boris Johnson appears to be focused very strongly on making sure that if we do no deal, the country will be prepared. And they've had 4 years for this, nearly.
Piers, it wasn't a worst-case scenario. It was looking... You've been on holiday. I think you should look at the document in absolute detail, as I have, and it goes through what's likely to happen to lorries at Calais and at Dover. And it says, roughly speaking, about 50% of lorries, HGV lorries, will not get through because they're not properly prepared. You see, we're going ahead with this, but this is... We had a king called Ethelred the Unready. This is Boris Johnson the Unready, Gove the Unready, Hancock the Unready, Raab the Unready. They have not properly prepared for this.
What choice have they got, Gordon? What choice have they got?
2 years.
OK, but let me put this to you. What choice have they got when Parliament, which is 3/4 remain, has blocked every attempt to get any Brexit deal through at all? Because, frankly, most of them don't want Brexit to happen. So at some point, if you were a Brexiteer like Boris Johnson, right, at some point, surely you have to press the nuclear button and say, well, if you're not going to let any deal go through Parliament, because fundamentally none of you believe in this thing, then we're going to have to go out without a deal. What choice does he have?
But you don't press a nuclear button by doing damage to yourself. I know for a fact that the European leaders would consider withdrawing the October the 31st deadline if Britain wanted that to happen. When you know you're not properly prepared, when you have been advised of the damage that is to be done, when you cannot guarantee the supply of food and the supply of medicines and the supply of components for industry, you don't go ahead with what is an act of self-harm, which is a self-inflicted wound. It's a known goal, which is being dressed up as a patriotic act, which is essential and necessary.
What if it works?
It is not.
What if it works? What if Brexit actually works? What if we're here in a year's time, we've no deal, and it turned out actually it wasn't the apocalypse that all the critics have painted, and that actually it wasn't that bad?
Well, everyone would celebrate, wouldn't they?
Would they? Or would all those who were opposed to it carry on?
I think Boris Johnson knows it can't work that way. That's why he's desperate to get a trade deal with America, and that will cause huge other problems for the British economy and having to make adjustments to trade with America. He knows that we're going to lose massive amounts of trade with Europe. You see, I'm visiting the car industry today. Most of our cars are exported to Europe. They're not sold in the domestic market. 1.5 million cars, 200,000 jobs, 800,000 indirectly in the supply industry. The car industry is making decisions now about investment in electric cars, driverless cars. If we don't get this right, it means that these decisions will be made to invest in mainland Europe to serve the European market and not made in Britain. And we've got to be aware of the long-term damage as well as the short-term risks to the British economy. And that's why, whether you're for or against Brexit, and I respect all those who voted for Brexit, in all conscience, I could not, if I were an MP now, vote for a no deal on October the 31st because I'm aware of the damage it's going to do to the lives and to the livelihoods. People waiting for medical treatments, people waiting for their jobs to be made secure, people worried about the supply of food and indeed the cost of food. If your viewers had been told in 2016 the cost of food would go up 10%, 15% or 20% as a result of a no-deal Brexit, then I think they would think twice about doing it. So you can stick to your views as to whether you're in favour of Brexit. A lot of them were told, but a no-deal Brexit is not in the country's interest.
What the viewers were told then, of course, was that there would be, if he voted to leave, there'd be a recession, 800,000 job losses and general carnage. And perhaps they've realised after 3 years that didn't happen.
Yeah, they were also told it was going to be the easiest thing in the world to get a new deal. So we were told all sorts of things.
Of course, but my point is, though, they've heard apocalyptic warnings for 3 years and they haven't actually materialised. So they're slightly like, well, OK. Final question, Gordon, before we let you go. I can't help but notice, Gordon, you're looking...
I've been in government. I've been in government, and when you hear these warnings from your... people who are on the ground, you've got to take them seriously. And I think Boris Johnson is too keen to go ahead without thinking of the consequences.
Final question, Gordon. I can't help but notice you're looking extremely svelte. What is the secret to your new glamorous, skinny look?
I'm doing what I think you're doing, Piers, and that's trying to keep fit. And all of us trying to get some exercise in every day.
Well, you're looking a lot better on it than I am. Your regime is working better than mine, Gordon.
Well, you've probably had a longer holiday than I had.